Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing our series on the Iraq War, and we're talking about the failures of the domestic Iraqi government to actually put in place good governance after the counterinsurgency, the surge strategy of the US in 2007-2008. So let's get into it. So last week we talked about the US's surge strategy, their counterinsurgency strategy, and how ultimately it was effective. It came into these different areas, into Sunni areas, into Shia areas. It was able to provide security for the local populations. It was able to root out the Shia militias and the Sunni insurgencies in these different areas. And crucially, it provided security in the environment so that the Iraqi government could step in and say, okay, now we have a chance to actually govern the country because we have a secure country. We have a secure population, which is very crucial if you want to actually instill democracy in a country. So what we're ultimately getting at here in this episode is the end point is the arrival of ISIS. How did ISIS arrive? How did this insurgency re-emerge in Iraq after the US had such a successful counterinsurgency strategy in 2007, 2008. And there's a lot of steps that go from, secure environment in 2008 after the surge to ISIS arriving at its apex in 2013, 2014. What led to this sort of breakdown in Iraqi security into the emergence of the re-emergence of the insurgency? There are two reasons why the gains that the US military bought the Iraqi government during 2007, 2008 during the counterinsurgency strategy ultimately failed, and we led to the re-emergence of the insurgency in the form of ISIS. The first of these reasons is the US withdrawal of forces in 2011. And so by 2011, the security situation in Iraq was very advantageous to the Iraqi government. By and large, there was tranquility. There wasn't nearly the level of sectarian violence or civil war that you saw in 2006, 2007. And so the US, who had already had a withdrawal date put at 2011 by the Bush administration, the Obama administration comes in and says, yeah, that's going to be the pullout date we have for US forces out of Iraq. The situation looks good. The domestic situation looks good. We don't have a status of forces agreement with the Iraqi government, and so our troops aren't protected by American law, by immunity from Iraqi judicial law. So it's time that we just pull out. The US does not have any more political will to stay in Iraq, and so it looks like the circumstances are in place for long-lasting democracy to take root in Iraq. So our job is done. We can pull out. Now, there were people in the Obama administration and the intelligence community that were saying, hey, look, the job isn't completely done. Though the insurgency is broken, they're not completely defeated. There are remnants in different areas. But because of all the previous reasons, President Obama thought, you know what, the Iraqi government, they can handle this situation. They've been trained enough, they got enough security, they got enough of the population unified behind their movement that we can get out and we can trust the Iraqi government to deal with it. Bad decision, because the Iraqi government did not deal with it. So what happens is, from the period of 2007, 2008, all the way up till today, basically, the Iraqi government is dominated by a Shia-led coalition, a Shia-led government. Because again, the Shia are the dominant population in Iraq. What happens, sadly, is that after the US forces pull out of Iraq in 2011, even though there is a secure environment for democracy, the Shia-led government starts to put in place policies and starts to act against the Sunni people, the Sunni population in Iraq, with prejudice. They imprison many of the Sunni politicians on charges of corruption, which technically were true, but every politician in Iraq at the time, Sunni or Shia, was corrupt. So it was obviously targeted at the Sunni population. In fact, the top leader, the top Sunni politician in the country, had his house surrounded by tanks and armed forces, and he was put under house arrest. And so the Sunni population was getting angry at these policies, angry at the government's behavior towards Sunni leaders and the Sunni population. They started to rise up in protest. As these protests started to happen, the Shia-led government by Nouri al-Maliki drastically, harshly put down these protests, and it ended in a lot of deaths, a lot of violence, and it created more reason, more motivation for the Sunnis to turn against the Shia-led government. And so in a nutshell, that's what happened. The Shia-dominated government put in place policies that discriminated against the Sunni population. The Sunnis rose up in protest, tried to take out their frustration against the Shia government by, democratic principles of protest and free speech. That didn't work. They got stomped out. And so what did the Sunnis do when they felt like they were being taken advantage of? They turned back to the insurgency. Now, crucially, during this time, ISIS, though it wasn't called that then, was still in operation at small levels in Iraq and was growing in Syria because of the Syrian protests and the Syrian civil war that broke out in 2011, 2012 in Syria. Once ISIS realized that the Sunni population was frustrated and was starting to rebel against the Shia-dominated government, they did two things. The first thing is they started to assassinate all of the Sunni tribal leaders who had been a part of the Sunni awakening during the counterinsurgency strategy of 2007-2008. They assassinated, according to David Ignatius from the Washington Post, over 1,500 Sunni leaders. I mean, imagine that. These were the people in the Sunni population who could bring peace to the community, who could unify the Sunni population with the Shia population in Iraq. They had done it before, but the ISIS group started to assassinate these guys so that they could put in place their leadership, or at least they could cause disunity within the Sunni group and take advantage of that disunity, take advantage of the hatred of Sunnis, of the Shia-led government, and start to provide security, fighting forces, and ultimately civil war broke out again in Iraq in the culmination of ISIS arising and taking large swaths of territory, the apex of which was Mosul. So there you go, guys. That's how we got from 2007, 2008, where the counterinsurgency of the United States actually provided security and gave the Iraqi government a chance at good governance. The U.S. forces pulled out. The Iraqi government did the opposite of what they should have done. They alienated the Sunni population yet again, and the Sunni population did what they had done in the past. They turned to jihadists, they turned to Islamic terrorists in order to provide security and give them a little bit of honor in a society where they had enjoyed honor for many, many years under Saddam Hussein. That's how you've gotten to the situation that's taking place in Iraq today, where you have such strong sectarian lines of Sunni, Shia, where you have the emergence of ISIS, and crucially, something we really didn't get to talk about, the influence of Iran in Iran arming, training Shia militias who are the bedrock of the fighting force of Iraqi forces who are taking back areas of Fallujah and Mosul. And so the big question is, as the Iraqi government is taking back these places, is fighting and taking back Mosul, will the Shia-dominated forces, the Shia-dominated government of Iraq, be able to actually institute good governance in Mosul, or will the majority Sunni population in these areas like Mosul, like Fallujah, will they rebel against the government again and turn to jihadists? That's it, guys. That's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Share the videos, guys. Subscribe to the channel. Remember, reality always trumps ideology.